Well, welcome to another episode of the Residential Developer Podcast. I'm your host. My name's Nathan Battishall, and I want to talk about something that's probably very close to home for me, and it's something I've found very important in the developer space, is the difference between a design service and a development partner. And I think a lot of we're seeing a lot more design companies very much morphing into specialised companies in what they're good at. And going back on my past and my history, obviously I've been in the design game virtually since I left school, did my studies and moved into the design architectural space. And I've always been in and around that space, whether it be full-time or delving back into that space. But I've been in and around it for a long, long time now. And like all of us, when I first started my business, I very much became someone who did every and any type of architectural design you can imagine and planning, whether it be renovations, new homes, duplexes, townhouses, industrial, commercial, childcare centres, medical centres, you name it, I delved in. There's probably very little that I haven't delved in my course of my career, but I realised probably a decade ago that it was important to become a specialist, and it was important to become someone skilled in a particular area. And for me, my passion's always been residential investment development, mid-spec and high-end. So that's the path that I pushed and led towards. And I think I'm just seeing more and more these days. Look, I get it early on in your career. If you own a design company, or if you're contracting, or if you're self-employed, often you'll do everything and anything to bring in work. And although it's a good thing, I think the danger can be you can become just a generalist at everything and not a specialist in anything. And look, this day and age, I think a lot of people, and we get a lot of clients come to us where they've just engaged a design firm because they like the facades and the designs on Instagram. And I think that's the interesting thing. Often I find if that's the first question you get asked, can you design something like this? And they show you screenshots of another design firm's facades or designs. They're really looking potentially the wrong way around, especially if you are wanting to do developments and projects. And I think that's where in this episode I just want to, delve into the difference between a design service and someone who is more of a development partner, someone who is an extension of what you're looking to do, someone who partners with you in, they may not be a business partner, but essentially what they are, they're someone who's invested in a long-term relationship with you in terms of doing projects and developments. And anyone listening to this podcast, that's generally your desire is to do projects on an ongoing basis. And I always talk about the importance of building your dream team and developing your dream team. And I think a designer and a planner is obviously very key in that space, because obviously they're helping you execute a project from, hopefully, if you're doing it the right way, from a before acquisition, from a compliance and a feasibility point of view, all the way through to then obviously design and planning, helping manage that approval and handing over a ready to go project for you to start construction with your builder. So, there's a big difference, I think, between buying drawings and buying decisions. There's a massive difference and gap between just buying drawings and buying decisions. And I think that's a key difference you'll often find between just engaging a design service and engaging a design partner. Often you'll find a design service, and I've been there in the course of my career, where it was so much about creating award-winning designs. And although the designer in me loves that, and I definitely want to create award-winning designs, when you understand the space you're working in, that being development, investment projects, residential projects, people are doing for some type of profitability purpose, you need to understand that it's actually more about profitability and creating a product that is perfectly suited to that site, to that demographic, and to be profitable. So sometimes it comes at the expense of winning an award. Sometimes the site doesn't allow it, where it's just got to be designed efficiently to obviously generate wealth and generate a profit. So I think not everyone's cut out for that. Some people just genuinely only want to create masterpieces that win awards, and there is a place for that. There's a space for that. We get sites where thankfully we're lucky enough to be able to really get a blank canvas. Client's got a big budget to work with in a really high-end type site that requires something unique. That's exciting. But I think there's an art as well to understanding areas and understanding sites and working within that. But I think one thing I've noticed is that the selection of your design team is always very critical. And obviously this month we've been talking a lot about avoiding risk before it's too late and starting slow with the mindset to make sure a project is suitable, that it's appropriate. And so for me, selecting a designer is so critical, because I think unfortunately many people don't realise this until it's too late, where they've engaged the wrong people who don't understand the project, who don't understand the site, who don't understand the needs, who don't understand buildability, who may not understand how to work within a budget, may not understand that demographic or that area or that product that you're needing. And unfortunately, it can be too late sometimes, where you've gone so far down the track that you've got a project that's approved, and you've got to go back to the drawing board. And we've got half a dozen projects on the go at the moment where a client is on round 2 or round 3 with previous firms, and we've had to come in and pick up the pieces and really get them back on track in terms of what can be achieved on the site and what they'd like to achieve on the site. So, for me, generally how most people engage designers is a few ways. This day and age, a lot of people, obviously, social media is such a big place now, and often you'll find a lot of people might be told about a particular designer, or they'll see a sign up on a billboard, I really like that duplex, or I really like that townhouse development. So all of a sudden they might follow that designer, whether it be on Instagram or Facebook, LinkedIn, or other means. But generally, obviously, although a website's important, generally your front of shop these days is your socials, and people tend to look at your socials often before they'll look at your website, although a website is critical. So often, people often, that's how they'll engage a designer. It could be just through word of mouth, could be through a recommendation, but often it can be then just they've followed they've walked around areas, they've seen designs they've done, and they've gone about it that way. And although, yes, that's not a bad way, and we get a lot of projects that way. A lot of clients come to us that way. They see things we've done that they like. They see our designs that they like, whether it be walking through an open home, or they've seen our signs up on site fencing, or then followed us, or all different means. And although they're good leads, often I find it's dangerous, because all they're looking at is the emotional, aesthetical side of it. And although if it's, like I said, one of our core clients is people doing their downsizer, turn the block into a duplex, sell one side, keep the other, or sell one side to lower the mortgage, or downsize, keep one side to rent, leave in the other, you name it. I think it's critical to understand more than just a nice design, because I think in this space, you've got to look for more than just a nice design, because unfortunately, a lot of the jobs we have had to come in and fix were nice designs, great designs, really nice, really lovely designs, very aesthetical, but a lot of them didn't work. And it's no point having a nice design if it doesn't work. It's no point having a wonderful design if, yes, it got approved, yes, it looks great, but can't be built. Not feasible. So you've got to have, I believe you've got to have a whole range of different skills. But I think that's how generally a lot of people engage designers these days, this day and age. And often I find design is very much treated like a commodity, where, and I can sometimes find myself getting tied up in that too, where you just always got to be putting out fresh new designs, fresh new facades, fresh new looks, everything on trend. And but the danger can be that you attract the wrong type of client, where someone who unfortunately is so emotionally invested in a project, they go down a rabbit hole and go down a design and go down a path only to have a project that doesn't stack up, or a project that's overcapitalized, or is well out of their budget range, and then the numbers don't stack up and work, and then you've got a stressed out, frustrated client who unfortunately got so emotionally invested in a particular style or a particular look or a particular design, rather than actually going backwards to go forwards and realizing, okay, what do we need? Like running a proper feasibility, like I mentioned recently on the podcast, around looking at the constraints of the site, looking at the buildability of the site, looking at the planning pathway of the site, and then running your numbers, and does it all stack up? Does it all work? And then you've got a really clear plan of attack. Another area is where the mindset breaks down in development. This is an area where the mindset breaks down in development, where you're viewing things only from a design point of view in that planning phase. When you're looking to engage who is going to actually get your vision and put it on paper and help execute that vision so that it can become a reality that can be built. And I think it's that, it can be a mindset that gets broken down in development, where you're only looking at it through the lens of design, aesthetics, and that side of it. But you've got to look deeper than that, because there's so many moving pieces, I believe, these days when it comes to a design, a planning, and an approval point of view, especially around development. It's very different if someone's designing your dream home and the budget's, is a lot more workable. It's very different, but we're talking investment development, residential investment development-based projects. For me, it's very critical. So, first and foremost, what is it that design does? What does a design service do? Well, first and foremost, the key element of a design service that we know, the role of a design service is to produce documentation and drawings. So its job is to produce architectural drawings. Its job is to design drawings to suit a site, to fit on a site, to suit a site, to comply. And generally that design service will then respond to various different instructions. So you may give that design firm, obviously, parameters. Generally you'll have some inspo of things you like, things you're leaning towards. Sometimes you'll often come with a budget, or you've run some numbers of what it needs to look like, where it needs to be at, numbers of bedrooms, all the different parameters in and around what type of product you're wanting to fit on that site. And look, from there, you'll generally there's a limited commercial responsibility, I guess, in that design firm. The role is quite simple. They're engaged to basically prepare drawings and get approvals. That's as simple as it is. Prepare drawings and to get approval. So that's one type of service that investors and developers can engage, is a design service. Your typical run-of-the-mill design service, their job is just to get your vision, put it onto paper, then get it approved. But I think there's a new type of wave of service which I think is like a design partner. So they're an extension of your vision of what you're looking to build. And I think you, in every type of project and development you do these days, you want to develop partnerships and relationships with people who are invested in your end goal, in your vision of what you want to do and where you want to go. And so the difference between a designer, as I've just mentioned, and then a development partner or a design development partner is essentially a design development partner is first and foremost getting a vision of what it is you want to do out of this project? And they're asking this before you've even bought your site. Because what in their mind, they're thinking it's important that we understand what the end goal is, what you're aiming to do, what you're looking to achieve to ensure that you can get the outcomes you desire. So is the outcome profit? Is the outcome to develop incredible projects that no one else is doing? And when you know that, sometimes you'll take a little bit less profit to create projects, to build a reputation as a developer who does things at next level. And that's great. Like, it doesn't have to always just be only profit. It can be actually building a product that lasts the test of time. And I've got a few clients like that. They want to be known as people who build a product, who design a product, who carry out a product that is trusted, that is loved, that is reputable, and one that is very different to what some other people are doing. So when they then sell that product, they have that reputation. They've earned that right to be able to sell that product for potentially a higher price point. So, for me, a development partner understands that element. And also a development partner often challenges the assumptions. So a development partner doesn't just listen to the dreams and the desires and the brief of the client. They challenge assumptions. So if they hear the client ask for something or say something that they believe contradicts the vision for where that project needs to go, for example, if they want it to be highly profitable, if they want it to hit a particular demographic, a design partner will be invested in where they actually at times push back and say, hey, I'm concerned that you're going over budget, or I'm concerned that this is out of your budget range, or I'm concerned in what you're looking to do, what you're looking to build. I'm worried that this isn't completely over spec for that area, or under spec. Sometimes they may say, look, the product you're doing here, I'm just concerned because you're wanting to sell it at this price, but it's quite a you're wanting to do quite a standardized product that I'm not confident will be popular in that area. So you're constantly challenging assumptions, and you're not you're investing yourself in to ensure that they get a great outcome, and you're I guess they're bringing you in for that expertise, not just in design and approval, but in the overall development to ensure that it kicks off on the right foot. And I think a good design partner, one thing they do is they flag risks early. Now, that's why a design partner and a development partner likes to be involved before you've even acquired your site, because what it enables them to do is to de-risk that site before you've actually made the purchase and help you run that feasibility. Yes, you run the numbers. Generally, a design partner is not going to run your numbers for you, but they're happy to look at your numbers and happy to look at that side of it. But a good design partner, what they're going to do is help you at that feasibility point to look at any constraints on the site, to look at what type of products can be designed on that site, to look at what type of approval outcomes that you're looking at, and to look at any risks and flag any risks, and then help you come up with a plan of how those risks can be mitigated. And if they can't be mitigated, that you're able to, I guess, not go ahead with that particular type of project. And I think another thing is, generally that type of design partner, rather than just as designer, they're looking at all different factors early on. They're not just looking at the design. And yes, don't get me wrong, and this is something a myth I need to bust, that a design partner isn't a drafting firm. They are still fully fledged custom designers with incredible creativity. But also another thing in this space around development, around that type of project, that type of work, they're already thinking about things like approvals. They're thinking about ensuring that it goes through smoothly. If it's a CDC, that it goes through nice and smoothly with a fast-track CDC approval. If it's a DA, they're already looking at, is there any issues with neighbour objections? Is there any issues with overshadowing or view loss? They're already thinking about those things before they're even designing, because what they're doing is they're de-risking your project, they're de-risking your site, and they're flagging those risks early, and they're putting into effect when they're coming up with the design. They're not just They're thinking about those sort of things early. They're already thinking about approval. They're already thinking about buildability, understanding, and they're already thinking about your budget. They're already thinking about your build budget. So if the build budget is quite limiting, they're already thinking about ways to make it nice and clean and buildable. They're already thinking about ways to design the product so that there's limited wastage, so you're not needing unnecessary steel beams, so you're not needing to have unnecessary cut and fills and retaining and all different things that can enable your site to lose control. So for me, they're the key differences between what a design service and a development design partner, I guess, entail and what they involve. And I think it's important to look at, I guess, two different types of thinking. There's a commercial thinking and a aesthetical thinking. And I think it's important to look at both, but it's dangerous just to look at one. You don't want to deal with a company that only looks at it from a commercial point of view, because they could design a product that aesthetically isn't pleasing and then affects it commercially anyway. But at the same time, you don't want to deal with a company that is only thinking aesthetical, because the problem is they're not thinking with a commercial mindset. And I don't think it's a case of either or. I think it's a case of both. And I've found that often a design partner or a development design partner will very much aim to have at the forefront both thinking, a aesthetical thinking and also a commercial thinking when it comes to a project. And, often we've got to be careful of this wide, nice design. That can be a dangerous type of thinking, because like I said, the amount of times we've often had people wanting to engage us just because your designs are nice, which, that's obviously nice for our ego. It's nice it's nice to hear that people love our designs, and we do get a lot of people come to us purely because they've seen our work, they love it. But for me, when you're doing developments and projects, you've got to be careful. And I'm putting myself in the shoe of yourself as an investor and developer, and I do my own projects too, so I understand this mentality that it's dangerous just to think about it's a nice design. I want like the one next door. It was a nice design. I want something the same. But you're not to know, just because next door had this incredible design, you don't know. Maybe that person completely overcapitalized. Maybe they were a builder developer, so they were able to just chew a little bit into their development margin, knowing that they're also paying themselves a builder's margin too. So, and maybe they just needed a project to keep them rolling, so they didn't have a lot of client work. So they were happy to, do it at a really low development margin. And the idea for them was just to do it at a higher standard. One, it builds their own portfolio to show clients for building nicer product. Two, it means that the product's not sitting on the market as long. They can flick it. And three, they were happy to take a less margin, knowing that it's enabled them to have a job. Because if they're doing a client job anyway, they would have only been getting builder's margin. Luckily enough for this project, they were getting builder's margin and a bit of development margin, even if it was a low amount. But when you're not the builder, you can't afford often to run it such low margins, because you're not the builder. You don't have control over that side of it, and often it's hard to get funding too if you're running at very risky margins. So it's not a place that you want to be stuck in. And I think I think experienced developers often don't just judge on design quality. Experienced developers, and to be someone who's experienced and switched on in that space, you learn and you begin to understand the importance of developing partners, design partners who are invested in your project, invested in your outcomes of your project, and not just winning a design award or not just creating a nice design, and more than happy to keep coming back and making revision after revision because it's not working out commercially. So I think that's a critical thing, is that commercial thinking versus aesthetical thinking. It's not either or. For me, it's both. It's having both. I think I look back at a few projects where clients saved a lot of money by getting the right design advice, like getting the correct design advice early on in the piece, where they're able to actually save a lot of money. For example, I had this client they'd been to I think it was like a project, volume type builder. Beautiful site, right on the water, backing right under the ocean, cracking site. But again, they'd run their numbers they'd run really low build costs and really high resale costs. So then obviously the numbers looked astronomical from a feasibility point of view. But the problem is thankfully they didn't build. They didn't start the build, but they'd gone the whole way through and got plans done by the builder, the volume builder. They'd had plans done, got approvals, CDC approvals, and all that side of thing, only to then luckily they did the right thing in this regard. Obviously they knew the build costs because they were working with the builder. They'd run their feasibility, but the big problem is they'd run their numbers based on these really high resales. And now the resales weren't so much inaccurate, but the problem is the comparables they were comparing their product to versus the comparables was a completely different build product. So although there is potential to hit the resales that they had, the product they were looking to put on that site was completely inferior. So obviously they had to then go backwards from there, but then they needed to look at the fact that other people that are happy to pay big money, and we're talking, over $3 million per product for a dual lock each side. We're not talking the whole thing, each side. Like, are people happy to be in a project spec'd up home spending over $3 million and it's not even a house, it's a duplex? So you needed to ask yourself, is there a market that's willing to do that? And you could even go backwards from there, and we started to say, is there a market that are happy to spend $2.5 million in a project home? It's not even a house, it's a duplex. Yes, it's in an incredible location, but people that are spending that sort of money, they're interested in a particular product. So anyway, long story short, we realised, and the client realised, most importantly, because they came to a development partner who understands development, they realised early on then in that process that we can't build this product because we're running huge risk. It's a product that may not even sell, and we may be in a whole world of pain if they go ahead with it. So anyway, by looking at it that way, we're able to work backwards from there. And yes, unfortunately, they'd spent a whole bunch of money with the builder on plans, some deposits and things like that, but they had to put all that aside and go back to the drawing board. And, by being able to go back from there, luckily it was a clean site. It wasn't constrained too bad, which was one headache, I guess, overcome. It was a clean site in that regard. But unfortunately, it was a site that needed to work backwards from. And we realised at that point this particular site was better to actually go down a DA pathway than a CDC, because the type of money they needed to get for this site needed to be first and foremost be a much more inferior build, needed to be a high spec'd up build. But we realised to get the resales they wanted to get, or needed to get the returns they needed to get, we needed to do a detached dwellings. Now the site was big enough, thankfully, to do detached, but it wasn't able to be detached by CDC, had to be DA. So again, needed to run the numbers. A high spec'd up duplex CDC versus a high spec'd up 2 standalone homes via DA. So ran the numbers for both. Client ran the numbers for both, looked at the different risk involved in each, looked at the pathway, and it just made a lot more sense that the product, being in the location it was, being the fact that it was a particular demographic and it's a limited There's not an unlimited buying pool of that buyer that will want that product. We realised the type of product we needed to go. So yes, we went a slower pathway. Yes, we went slow to go quick. But the beauty is we were able to design a product that suited the area, a product that was much more inferior anyway, because all of a sudden now we're not using duplexes, high-end duplexes as comparables. We're using houses as comparables. So we're able to turn that situation and project around and make a really amazingly healthy profit. But it came as a result of actually having to look at things not through the lens of just create a great design, because it was a phenomenal area and they were just going to put like a project volume type, not a great product on that site. But it wasn't just literally pull out your design artistic license and go nuts. It was a case of having to be strategic and work back. And yes, that particular project were able to actually really be a little bit creative and add some aesthetical things that, were quite unique to it. But it was still very important in actually having to, to work backwards from there. So, for me, I just think it's critical. It's key. There is a big difference between a design service and a development partner, and it's always good in this space to break down the differences between what they are. Let's face it, some people will develop great relationships with a design service who's not overly switched on when it comes to projects and developments and that side of it, which is okay. But I think it's important too, if you're wanting to be successful in this space, it's to understand the differences so that you can go in with your eyes wide open when you are engaging various planning services, because it can make or break your project. It can really set your project back, or it can set your project up. So I think, for me, there's probably a few mistakes or potentially a few warnings when you are deciding what you're looking to do between a design service or a development partner. I think one of the biggest warning bells that a lot of people come unstuck with is they just purely go shopping on price. We often get people who not go with our services based on price, and I always say we're nowhere near the dearest in the market, but we're definitely not the cheapest either. And if you just shop on price, you'll obviously often you're going to get a much more inferior product. If you're only shopping on price, because it's a dangerous space. If you're spending anywhere from $1 million to $2 to $3 to $4, $5 million on a development, you don't want to be haggling on a couple of $1,000s in that space. You want to be engaging people for the right reasons, who have a vision for where you want that project to go. And I think another danger or mistake or warning in this space can be treating consultants as vendors and not partners. The danger can be when you're only treating them as vendors, you can run into trouble because you can attract people that aren't invested in your project, but you can also, naturally they can lose. You're not able to articulate the vision of where you want to go. Whereas when you've got a design partner, you build that camaraderie and they get to know who you are, where you want to go. Doesn't mean you got to be friends either. You still want to be in business together. Doesn't mean you've got to cross that boundary. But when you've got partners, it's people who are invested in where you're going, people who are lifelong, people that are working with you and towards you. For me, that's the reason I love this space, because you're not designing. Often when I'm used to design someone's dream home, you'd never see them again. Whereas, as a design partner, you get to build life and camaraderie with that client. You get to know more about who they are, how they tick. You get to understand more and more what their projects are like. I love it. Like some of our clients, when our client buys a site, obviously we help in the acquisition and check it out and all that sort of thing. But because we know them so well now, like it's we can just move so smoothly through the process because we know how they think, we know what they want, we know their desires, we know, because we've been able to build longevity and trust and relationship and be able to really be on the same page with clarity in where they're going. So I think a key thing to take home for this episode, if you want to remember this, the difference between design service, engaging a design service versus a development partner, is understanding that good decisions compound. When you make good decisions, they compound, but bad decisions compound faster. So, and I think that's just critical. When you make good decisions, especially from the very get-go of your project, those good decisions compound generally into good developments, good projects, good profit, and so on. But when you make bad decisions early in the piece, you engage the wrong people, those bad decisions, they compound faster and they add up and they build up faster and they end up with a project that's difficult. So, look, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with us on our socials or via email or through our website. As usual, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.